Record. Okay, we are in week 3 of Jacob, and just to sort of remind everybody, Jacob was alive probably in 1,900 years before Christ was born. He was alive 500 years before Moses, just to put it in perspective. So as Scott talks about the long game, it is a long game. The other thing to remember, I looked up today because I like trivia things, and the saying now I forget how do you say it? The God of my fathers.
Yeah.
Oh, the God of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That phrase shows up 42 times in the Bible. And Jesus talks about it. Jesus is debating with the Sadducees about resurrection. And he brings up the fact, you Sadducees don't even know the scriptures. And he refers to the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that lineage, the Sadducees knew it, and we need to know it.
Well, and what he's telling them is they revere the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, the law. And he's saying, it's the same God. I mean, this is you revere Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, he's reminding them this is the God that they followed. And what he said to them still holds. And that's the sort of the purpose in that.
And so last week we ended up with Jacob leaving Beersheba, going to Haran to see his uncle Laban and to find a wife. His mother, Rebecca, told him to leave and to go find a wife back where he was from, so he could find a wife that believed in God.
And we see from the names of the places, that these are people who worship Yahweh, the same God. And the Hittites that Esau got his wife from do not.
So we are in chapter 28.
That sounded terrible, didn't it? Got his wives from? I'm sorry about that. That's a terrible way to put it, like you go to the store or something.
But it was sort of like that in the Old Testament.
Well,
Where do you get your wife?
Match.com.
And that is a true story. He really did get his wife on Match.com. We went
Another time. Let's get on with the study.
You asked. Okay. Genesis.
Saw that we all know each other too well.
Genesis 28, verse 10. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. On reaching a certain place, he spent the night there because the sun had set. And taking one of the stones from the place, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. And Jacob had a dream about a ladder that rested on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven. And God's angels were going up and down the ladder. And there at the top, the Lord was standing and saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you now lie. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east and north and south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob woke up, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was unaware of it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
So, as so often happens, there's a whole lot packed into, this small section. He left Beersheba, which is in Israel terms, it's way down to the southwest, not quite to the coast. but he's heading to Haran, that's way up in far north Syria, or, you know, the lower parts of Iran. And I checked it on the map. I was just curious what it looked like. I was going to have a map, but I don't feel good, so I didn't get one. But if you look at the path that he's likely going to take, the only logical way, you wind up going through Jerusalem, what we now call Jerusalem, or at least really, really close. This whole thing of Armageddon, they say that if you wanted to invade from up in Syria, you'd sweep down over the bottom end of the Galilee and you'd come out right there. And that's the path that he would take. So it says he came to a certain place. And this is one of those weird things in Hebrew when it's sometimes words are intentionally vague and they're conspicuously vague. There's a term they use it's so-and-so. They say it's a person, but they're letting you know they're not important to the story. If you're a Monty Python fan, it's Sir not appearing in this film. Okay. And in this case, it said he went to a certain place, and it's almost like they're telling something by not telling. I think he's probably up in the vicinity of Jerusalem, and it becomes a factor later on. But he gets to the place, he lays his head down on a stone. And I never thought about it, but you know, nomads probably like that. They don't have pillows. The thought of bringing up a nice stone to serve as a pillow is odd, but he has a dream. And this is not like normal dream. And what I want you to keep in mind is that there's a saying where it says your young men will see visions and your old men will dream dreams. These are significant communication from God in a dream, but things are not like always totally plain. And sometime I may tell you a story of how things work in those kind of dreams. I can tell you from experience. And so what he sees is this, they call it a ladder. You can think a staircase, even though the thought of angels climbing up and down a ladder, I mean, it's kind of an odd picture if you think his ladder. People do strange things with this section because they want to make it like it is an exact detail of real life, you know, that there really was a staircase with angels going up and down, and God is at the top and speaks to him. This is a message from God in a dream, and the way it's conveyed to him tells him that, you know, that this is not just something that you cooked up and you're having a dream. This is God speaking to you. And the idea of the angels, this whole display, that's sort of how things work in these dreams. And so he tells him, you know, and remember that this is not supposed to be like he's awake. And God tells him, I'm the Lord God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I'll give you and your descendants the land on which you now lie. Don't you kind of see? He's acknowledging the fact that you're standing here in this dream, but your body's laying down. Okay, that should have been a clue. I'm going to give you the land on which, in other words, this place you're in belongs to you and your descendants, and you're about to leave and go way, way away from here. But I'm going to bring you back, and I'm not going to leave you until I've done everything that I've promised you, and that is I'm going to bring you back here, and this is going to belong to you. This is your, you know, your inheritance, if you will. But he says your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. And here's that promise. Well, it says you'll spread out north and south, but then there's the promise. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And here it is again. This is the blessing of Abraham. This is the promise. And we've kind of repeated to get the message. When we say that they're the chosen people, they are the lineage of the Messiah. That's what they're chosen for. And this promise that goes to Abraham, and then Isaac gets it directly, and then Jacob gets it directly. All the world will be blessed through you and your descendants. And that is the reference that eventually we get down to the Messiah. That's the blessing of Abraham. And Jacob gets it also. He says, I'm with you. I'll watch over you wherever you go. Now, there's a place later on where David wants to build the temple in Jerusalem. And David has this idea that this will be God's house. He's going to be contained here. And he actually gets this message that says, when you guys were nomads, when you were out, going here and there, and you were doing business in tents, and you had the tent, wasn't I always with you? Didn't I go everywhere? And he's trying to tell him that this may be the place where you come together to worship, but this is not where I live. Well, you see what happens. Jacob has this dream. I won't leave you until I've done what I've promised. And then when Jacob woke up, he thought, oh, surely God is in this place. And I just didn't know it. What a great place this is. This is the actual gateway to heaven, is what he thinks. And because it says it doesn't mean he says it, doesn't mean he's right, that he has the right idea of things. I'm pretty confident saying that there's not like one portal to heaven on this planet, and this happens to be where the angels go up and down the ladder. That's not what's here, but that's what Jacob takes from it. And he's not trying to do anything wrong or misguided or weird. It's just that he sees this event and he says, I want to memorialize it. I want to honor it. But in his mind, God spoke to him here and nowhere else, and it must mean that this is where God is. And so he says, I'm going to come back here, and when I do, I'm going to build maybe not a temple. How does it?
Oh, we're not there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead again.
Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone that he had placed under his head, and he set it up as a pillar. He poured oil on top of it and called the place Bethel, though previously the city had been named Luz. When Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and watch over me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I may return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone I have put up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give you a tenth.
So some kind of, things that we tend to pass over in here, but he says he took the stone that he'd had his head rested on and turns it up as a pillar. And out in this countryside desert, it's pretty barren stuff a lot of the time, but they raise up these pillars. Ebenezer is one of the words for them, but they raise these things up as a marker of something important that happened. And he says that he anointed it, which is to kind of consecrate it. And he called the place Bethel, which means the house of God, or the city of God. There is a city there, but he calls it Bethel, the house of God. And it had another name. So he wants to consecrate it as the place of God. But then he made a vow saying, and this is another one of those things that people, I think, twist pretty badly. It sounds like they say he's bargaining with God. Well, if God will do this, and if God will do this, and if God will do this, I'll follow him. And I don't really think that's what's going on here. God is giving him this promise that says, I'm gonna carry you through to this place you're going. I'm gonna watch over you while you're there, and I'm gonna bring you back. And if you remember, he says, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac. He didn't say, I'm your God. There's good reason to think that Jacob at this point may not really be convinced. He may not really be a follower a believer in Yahweh. But he says, you know, if God is going to do this, if he's really going to be watching over me and feed me and bring me back to this place and give it to my descendants, then he'll be my God. That's, I think at this point, Jacob becomes fully committed. He realizes, and this dream I think that's the intent of the dream. But he says, then the Lord will be my God, and this shrine I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that, here's a weird thing, and this is not an accident. I went back and checked it. It's not. He says, and of all that you give me, surely I will give you a tenth. And he's saying you, he's speaking to God. And what is prayer? Have we covered this enough times? Prayer is a conversation with God. And whether it's, you know, indented and poetic and everything else, he's speaking to God at this point. And he says, you know, you'll be my God. And he says that of all that you give me, there's this acknowledgement. He says this, what I'm going to receive is from Yahweh, and surely I will give you a tenth. And we know this term tithe, and it literally just means a tenth, but it's not some magical biblical thing. If you were a country that got conquered, you became a vassal state, you had to pay tribute. You know, they don't want to they don't occupy it. They'd rather let you work the land, and then they take a cut. And a tenth is a pretty common thing. But he's saying essentially he is showing submission to God in the same way. He says, I will honor you. I will give this tenth of everything that you give me. And it's not it wasn't a command from God. Please note that. God didn't say, you need to follow me and you need to lay down a tenth of everything you have. This was something that Jacob recognized and said, I recognize that everything is going to come from you. And when I'm back here, I will give you a tenth of everything that you give me. And it's again, this is kind of a neat thing between it. And I try not to put too much, you know, these words are what, 4,000 years old now. I mean, you got to be careful with that. But I think the intent here is pretty clear. Jacob has recognized that God has told him, I'm being your God. And Jacob recognizes it and says, yeah, and I'm going to be your servant. You will be my God. I accept that. And it's a kind of a worthwhile model for how some things should work.
Chapter 29. Jacob resumed his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. He looked and he saw a well in the field, and near it lay 3 flocks of sheep, because the sheep were watered from this well. And a large stone covered the mouth of the well. When all the flocks had been gathered there, the shepherds would roll away the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. My brothers, Jacob asked the shepherds, where are you from? We are from Haran, they answered. Do you know Laban, the grandson of Nahor? Jacob asked. We know him, they replied. Is he well? Jacob inquired. Yes, he answered. And here comes his daughter Rachel with his sheep. Look, said Jacob, it is still broad daylight. It is not yet time to gather the livestock, water the sheep and take them back to the pasture. But they replied, we cannot until the flocks have been gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. As soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, with Laban's sheep, he went up, rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well, and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept out loud. He told Rachel that he was Rebekah's son, a relative of her father, and she ran and told her father. When Laban heard the news about his sister's son Jacob, he ran out to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house, where Jacob told him all that had happened.
So first of all, there's a well in this part of the world. Water is scarce. And if you get a working well, we kind of skip chapter 26 that talks about just this. You get a working well, there's going to be somebody that wants to take it away from you. They certainly are going to want to take advantage of it. And so this one, we think of a well as a big deep hole with a rock circle around it, right? And they lower a bucket. Sometimes it's a low spot, it's depression where water wells up and makes a pool. And they've got, I don't know if they had to build something around it, but they've got a stone that is there, I think probably mostly to keep other people out. And it seems to be big enough that these shepherds couldn't do it. So he comes up, he catches them here at the well, and he says, "Where are you guys from?" And they say, "Well, Haran," which is where he's headed. And he says, "Well, do you know Laban?" And they say, "Oh yeah, we know Laban. And look, here comes his daughter right now, and she's a shepherdess." We learn later that Rebecca is exceptionally beautiful, like exceptionally beautiful. And I don't know for sure, we speculate what's going on, but he sees Rebecca coming
This beautiful woman.
and he tells these other ones, he goes, "Look, it's the middle of the day." What's that, Rachel?
Oh, yeah, Rachel, not
I
Rebecca.
said Rebecca
Yeah.
It's Rachel. But he sees this woman coming, and he tells these other guys, "Hey, you know what? It's the middle of the day. You shouldn't be here. You need to be back out in the field. Water those sheep and get out of here." I think he's trying to get rid of them. I mean, it looks like he's trying to get rid of them. And they go, "Oh, no, we don't do things that way here." I mean, I don't think he's just weighing in on how they run their shepherding business. But we don't do that because we wait till all the sheep come and we water them all at once. And so Rachel shows up, and I mean, we can.
And he went up and rolled the stone away.
He goes and rolls the stone away by himself. And he may be showing off a little bit. I mean, if you take that view of what's going on here, it will fit with the rest of this story. So, we'll see.
We'll go with it.
Yeah, we'll go with it. But he goes and rolls the stone away, and he waters his uncle's sheep. And then it says that he kissed Rachel. And again, in the Middle East, there's this custom of you kiss on the two sides of the face, the cheeks. It's probably nothing more than that. And he wept aloud. And that hangs a lot of people up. I see Laura's given me kind of an odd look about him weeping aloud. We're kind of, for one thing, I don't know if we have this idea that we all have to be big and tough, but weeping, let's try another way. When someone dies, they mourn. We don't really mourn. We kind of do, but they wail, they scream.
People in the Middle East.
People in the Middle East, when they mourn, and it is a display that makes a lot of people, Westerners, uncomfortable. Oh my gosh, nobody carries on like that. Control yourself. They don't hold anything in. They mourn. And this idea of weeping aloud, he has found his people. He has found his mother's people. He is where he's supposed to go. And as it happens, he's found a wife. I still have this idea that in his mind, he's already figured out, that love at first sight. I think he's already, and he's there for a wife, remember? So what is he seeing? He's seeing that God provides, that God's as good as his word. And he
just promised him back at,
well, it's been a long way, but yeah.
And this has been a 500-mile jaunt.
Yeah.
So he,
And so he in that part of the world, weeping aloud for joy is not that weird of a thing, I mean, we tend to take things from our culture and say, well, he's behaving really, really odd. No, he's not. He's just not. It makes sense there. And we saw things while we were there in a year that lets people do things differently, but it makes perfect sense what I'm seeing. And then he tells her that he is Rebecca's son and he's family, he's, and I talked to Mary about this week. When you don't have Netflix and you don't have newspapers and all the other radio and everything that we have, anything new to the area is a big deal. Everybody comes to see. It used to be that in rural towns, when the circus came to town, remember they came by train, and they'd wheel in, and everybody comes because it's something new, it's something exciting. And he says, I'm Rebecca's son. I'm one of your people. I'm your, cousin, as it turns out. And it's exciting. And she just leaves the sheep and runs off to tell her father, oh, there's one of our people has just come in from all the distance and all this time. And she runs to tell Laban. And when Laban hears, he ran to meet him. And we also probably don't understand the connection with family the way they do. We see it in a lot of these stories about how important descendants are and family is, but it is different. So Laban comes and it says that he ran out to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And it says that Jacob told him all that had happened. What does that mean? What could he have told him about what had happened? He probably told him the story about him and Esau and the birthright, among other things, I guess. But I would think he explained to him, this is why I'm here. I'm hiding out from my brother, and I'm the guy. I have the birthright. I have the blessing.
And I've come to get a wife.
I've come to get a wife. No, I'm sure that's he probably did tell him that, now that you mention it. So that sets the stage.
Then Laban declared, you are indeed my own flesh and blood. After Jacob had stayed with, I know what we were going to say here. So, Scott always tells us there was no chapters and verses. And when you read this a little different, if I go back to verse 13 and say, when Laban heard the news about his sister's son Jacob, he ran out to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home, where Jacob told him all that had happened. Then Laban declared, you are indeed my own flesh and blood. So when he tells him about how he got the birthright and everything, one can definitely read this, that Laban says, oh, you and I are so much alike, which we'll find out later, they're so much alike.
But part of Mary's point there, and some of you that haven't been in this, these things were not written with chapter and verses, all right? They didn't exist. And people have gone in and added them. And so if you see sometimes where things are broken in an odd place, don't be surprised. You gotta, they break.
Or if you unbreak them and read it a different way, all of a sudden you have a different understanding of that phrase. Yeah. So after Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said to him, just because you're my relative, should you work for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older named Leah, the younger was named Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Since Jacob loved Rachel, he answered, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban replied, better that I give her to you than to another. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Yet it seemed but a few days because of his love for her.
Let's stop it there.
Okay.
So after working for him for a while, Laban says, there's just because you're a relative, you shouldn't work for nothing. Yeah, give me your price. Seem odd to you? Not really, not if you understand the people, because he figures sooner or later, Jacob is going to come back and say, you owe me. And Laban is going to get it established. I'm not going to get caught off guard and have you demand more than what I want to pay. So he says, tell me what you think your wages should be. There's some boys out there. They're just great young men. And they've helped me around here a little bit, mostly because I wanted them to, have the work. But that's what I did to them. I said, tell me how much you're going to charge me for this. Well, whatever you think I'm worth. I said, no, 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 no. You're going to have to learn how to do this. So tell me what you think I should pay you. And that's sort of what Laban is doing. He said, tell me, and if Jacob, this is a lesson I'll give you about living in the Middle East. If Jacob gives a price that's too low, Laban will say, sounds good to me. That's great. And if Jacob gives a price that's too high, Laban will negotiate with him. And unless you're really good at this, you're gonna get taken advantage of every time. When we lived there, there was a guy at our house that picked up the trash. He had a cart. This is all very, but he goes and picks up everybody's trash. And we found out he's just a guy that does this for the neighborhood. And we're supposed to pay him. We found out his name was Natan. And I said, how much do we pay you? And he did that to me. Oh, just whatever you think it's worth. And I had asked other people, and no one in the neighborhood will tell me how much do you pay Natan? Oh, just pay him whatever. This is the way it's done.
And he's like, I don't know.
And I go to Natan. He says, just whatever you think. Because again, I know that if I pay him too little, he's going to get revenge on me. I mean, the trash will, something's going to happen. He'll let me know about it. But if I pay him too much, he's fine with it. That's what's going on here. Now, I think also that Laban by this time must have seen Jacob making eyes at his daughter. And especially, as Mary said, if that's one of the things that Jacob told him was, I'm here to get a wife. My mother and father said, come here and get a wife. Laban's thinking. Smart guy. And Jacob tells him, you got this daughter that I kind of have.
Daughter number 2, though.
Daughter number 2, but I have my eyes on. I give her to me as a wife. And it says that the older daughter, Leah, has weak eyes. That's one of those difficult translations. It doesn't mean that she needs glasses, but they don't have glasses back then. That word could mean, but that word is soft, can
Kind.
be kind, gentle. So what they're kind of telling you, she has soft eyes. What they're saying is Leah's cute, but Rachel's beautiful. That's what's going on. Leah has a good personality. She would be a fine choice, but Rachel is beautiful. That's literally what you're being told here. And I think Laban knows this. He has to have seen what's going on. And we will see later in this study that Rachel has that kind of beauty that actually is trouble. She's very, very beautiful. And so Laban knows the score. He knows what's going on. And Jacob actually volunteers. He says, I'll work 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And Laban says, well, better I should give her to you than to another, at least your family. And 7 years of labor for a guy that works hard is a pretty good bride price. The dowry, the amount that's paid to the family of the bride, 7 years of labor is a pretty healthy amount, especially when you can keep your eye on him, you're going to get good value out of it. So they strike a deal. And he says that he worked 7 years, and it seemed like just a few days because of his love for her. And then Mary's going to read, and we come to this next sentence, and this causes squeamish Westerners to just cringe. How could you possibly say something like that in the Bible? Let's go ahead.
Finally, Jacob said to Laban, grant me my wife, for my time is complete, and I want to sleep with her.
It is what it is. Okay. I mean,
And they say the Bible's boring.
It is what it is. It says exactly what it means, and everybody understands. I mean, everybody gets it. They do have, even with Mary and Joseph, they're betrothed, but it is the way it works is you have the betrothal, and then they're effectively married, but the bride spends the next year with her, living in her parents' house And then after a year, they finally move in together. This is not unusual. And we listen to so many, we do listen to a lot of stuff, and we listen to so many people that make a big deal out of this sentence. Don't make a big deal out of the sentence. It is what it is.
So Laban invited all the men of that place and prepared a feast. But when the evening came, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maidservant. When morning came, there was Leah. "What have you done to me?" Jacob said to Laban. "Wasn't it for Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter for marriage before the older. Finish this week's celebration, and we will give you the younger one in return for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did just that. He finished the week's celebration, and Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his servant girl Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maidservant. Jacob slept with Rachel as well, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, so he worked for Laban another 7 years.
So here we go. They have
housewives.
they have this wedding celebration. And remember, I've told you before that in the Middle East, trickery, if you're really, you really are shrewd about getting over on some, your rival, it's celebrated. Some of their big kind of heroes like Paul Bunyan are these stories about people, that trick some other king or some other, important person out of their wealth with some big exotic story. It's part of the culture. And so what Laban does here is he dresses up, and they wear veil, that they wear, whether it's burqa, but he can't tell who she is that night at the wedding. And you have no doubt there's wine involved. And when the time comes, they send him off to the tent. And the next morning, Jacob wakes up and looks over. This is the one with the good personality. This is not. And he goes to Laban. He says, what have you done to me? He says, you didn't. Wasn't it for Leah, for Rachel that I worked 7 long years? And Laban says, oh, no, in this part of the country, we don't marry off the younger daughter before the older daughter. And you didn't ask. I thought you knew that. I thought you understood. And he says,
I will give you Rachel, but you have to take Leah too.
Yeah. And maybe I'm going to wind up making too many jokes here. You understand the situation, what has gone on, and he has tricked him. Now, what you need to see from this is you need to go back and remember the deception with Jacob disguising himself, the goat skins, right? And so there's this fake identity, and he tricks Isaac to get the birthright. And here he is, there's a fake identity, and he's been tricked out of 7 years of his life. This is not an accident.
As Laban said in verse 14, you are indeed my own flesh and blood.
You are, that's right. You're just like me. And then he proves it. And that's what's happened here. Why is this important to look at that? Because we talk about Jacob, and people love to say Jacob was a scoundrel. Jacob was a cheat and all this bad stuff. And why would God use somebody like that? And I kind of think, looking at the trajectory of this, that this is sort of the beginning of Jacob realizing that maybe this is not a good way to do things. And he gets a taste of his own medicine. It's as close to identical as you could get.
Karma.
It is karma. If you that's the idea behind this. Now, what you see is there's another thing that people tell, and they do sermons, and they say how that he had to work another 7 years, and then he gets
It was a week.
Rachel.
He got 2 wives. He waited 7 years and got 2 wives in a week.
Because they have a tradition that this wedding ceremony lasts a week. There's a celebration. It's a big deal. Weddings, you know, I mean, and it lasts a whole week. And Laban tells him, oh yeah, no, we never, you have to take the older one first. He said, tell you what, give Leah her week. Give her the honeymoon, give her I mean, this is her big wedding day, okay? Give that, wait till the end of the week, and then I'll just give you Rachel for another 7 years. But he gives Rachel then, and then Jacob works another 7 years. Yes, sir.
Did our biology change from then until now as far as the marriage between relatives?
Biology is an interesting thing. You're talking about, you know, first cousins and things that go on. Our biology, I don't think has changed. I think that practice, like say in European royalty, there was so much interbreeding. I mean, one time, the likelihood of you having problems is not as high, and I happen to have looked at this. There was a lot of interbreeding within the European royalty, and that gene pool was small, and it happened over a long time until it begins to sort of pile up. You know, humans had sort of prohibitions against marrying first cousins long before we understood biology. So there's more to it than that. Again, you have to remember that people, we don't have dense populations. We have tribes and clans, and the way people live, marrying a first cousin is just not that unusual. And it's not even in the Bible. We see some other instances of this. I'm always cautious. It might as well take a minute to talk about that. People are very eager to look at characters in the Bible and judge them, you know, and get Jacob when he cheats Esau out of the birthright. And what we should see from that is that we're flawed. We're humans. The people that God uses are not perfect human beings because they can't be. And so if you don't have a story about something they've done wrong, it's only because you don't have the story. We're human beings. And God uses, when the temple got rebuilt after the Jews got taken off to exile, there's this pagan king, you know, Cyrus, that actually rebuilds the temple. He gives the money and sends the people, and God uses people often who we would have an easy time judging. If we're going to judge, it's always good to look this way. But your question about the first cousins, I would just not make too much of it. It's not it's almost if not a necessity at that time. It's hard to avoid once in a while. Yeah. And now I forgot where we were.
Where were we on the next one? When I'm on verse 31 of chapter 29. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and gave birth to a son, and she named him Reuben. For she said, the Lord has seen my afflictions. Surely my husband will love me now. Again, she conceived and gave birth to a son. And she said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has given me this son as well. So she named him Simeon. Once again, Leah conceived and gave birth to a son. And she said, now at last, my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. So she named him Levi.
Let's stop for just a second.
Okay.
Most of you are probably familiar, some may not be, but Jacob winds up with 12 sons, and they wind up being the 12 tribes of Israel. You should recognize some of these names. And so this is the story of that. And it's it's sad. It's almost, well, not almost pathetic. It is pathetic that Leah wants Jacob to love her, and he just doesn't. And you see in that she's just desperate. Each one of these names means something, like, and if you get to the actual meaning of the name, God hears, or God, God will hear me. And this, remember how important the lineage is, the descendants. And for the women, bearing a son is a big deal. It carries on the lineage. They have fulfilled the sort of the highest calling. It goes back to what you said, though. When there aren't a lot of people, if you had to try and make your way alone in this world, in this time, in the desert, or the high, it's hard. You need more people. You need to help each other. And so what I think I've mentioned it before, but the literal meaning of a brother is a strong house. It's a symbol, it's an ox, the old Proto-Hebrew, it's an ox that means strong, and it's another one that is a tent, it's the house. So a brother is a strong house. A son is the house and the seed, it's the house continued. The focus on that, if you don't understand how important it is, a lot of this doesn't make as much sense. But Leah bears, we find, early, quickly, 3 sons.
Another one here, second.
And all, well, but we haven't gotten there yet, remember?
Yeah.
And what we see is all she wants is for Jacob to love her, and she's desperate for that. And she also wants the sort of the recognition. I've borne 3 sons. In that culture, this is a very important thing. And so, what we're told at the beginning, it says that God saw Leah's pain and gave her these 3 sons. What we're about to see, though, is this situation turns really, really sick. I mean, disturbing. And this is one of those cases. This is not like marrying a first cousin. We're supposed to see this rivalry as out of hand, and we're going to see that.
And once more she conceived and gave birth to a son. This time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah. Then Leah stopped having children. So we've got the first 4 sons of Jacob. And as Scott said, each of these sons eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. And so, like you said, you recognize these names as being the tribes of Israel. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing any children for Jacob, she envied her sister. "Give me children or I will die," she said to Jacob. Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, "Am I in place of God who has withheld children from you?"
All right, let's pause for a second real quick. And I know.
No, I'm fine.
But you see this, Rachel begins to say, first of all, she's jealous. And she also has lost tremendous status in that culture. She's not bearing children at all, but no sons. And Leah now has 4. And this is serious business. I mean, she is, and you remember, maybe you don't, maybe we didn't even do it. When Isaac's wife, Rebecca, I got that right.
Yeah, no, we did do that. Prayed.
Hasn't had a child, and she tells Isaac, give me a child. And Isaac goes and prays for his wife. Jacob, when his wife comes to him, when Rachel comes to him and says, "Give me a child or I'll die." You recognize the technique. Jacob gets angry. Now, it helps that Jacob already has, what has he got, 4 sons at this point?
Yeah.
Now he's got 4. His lineage is taken care of, I mean, can't we just get along? And he gets angry and he says, what am I, God, that I should do this? Who has withheld the children from you? Not me. And don't come griping to me about it. This is not the same sort of a response that Isaac gives. And yes, we should see the contrast between the two. And it worked out better for Isaac than it did for Jacob.
And as we read on here, you'll see that Rachel did what Sarah did with Abraham and takes matters into her own hands. So this is Rachel. She says, then she, Rachel, here is my maidservant, Bilhah, sleep with her, and that she may bear children for me, so that through her I too can build a family. So Rachel gave Jacob her servant Bilhah as a wife, and he slept with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has heard my plea and given me a son. So she named him Dan. And Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, it is in my great struggles, I have wrestled with my sister and won. So she named him Naphtali.
We're almost out of time, so let's finish it up with this. This is starting to get kind of twisted. She gives her maidservant
Crazy.
to Jacob and says, you know, God will give me a son through her. What you have to see from that is that she sees the maidservant as a possession. It's just an extension of her, right? It's a twisted logic, but she says, I'll give her my maidservant and God will give a son through her and it'll be like mine. And
then Rachel names Bilhah's son. Rachel names him, the first one Dan, and the second son.
Rachel
Naphtali.
names the sons of her maidservant. She sees the servant girl as an extension of herself. It's just like I did it because she doesn't count. Now we're back to what I always talk about, people that we treat like part of the furniture. That attitude that I can just do whatever I please with a person that's a servant is never any more apparent than this. And the second one, this is where it gets really weird. She sends Bilhah to Jacob again, and Bilhah bears another son, and Rachel names the child. And what she says is, I have wrestled with my sister and I have won. It's
And there's
just,
still 4-2.
it-
I don't know. I'm a numbers person. I'm still thinking Lee is ahead.
what I always try and come back to on these kind of things is, what can we learn? What do we learn about ourselves and our ability to tell ourselves things like that? She takes it in her own hands. God is, she's going to do things. And I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes I look and say, God, I know you have a plan, but I think you need a little help because it doesn't seem to be progressing the way I think it should. And we have these examples that should be telling us that that's not the way it should be. But then this ability to say, to twist everything to where it's all about you. And she says, I have wrestled with my sister and I've won. This has just gotten sick. And it's going to get worse. We have to cut off here, but it's going to get worse. Eventually, we will wind up with 12 sons and 12 tribes of Israel. And it comes about in a very strange way. Oh, and by the way, somewhere in the middle of that, one of them gives birth to a daughter, and her name is Dinah in the story. We don't talk about her. It is just and we can learn from negative examples, and we should. And that's part of the beauty of what we see in the Bible, is that these people are not icons. They're not, we don't have these make-believe examples of people who are larger than life and better than everyone. These are humans. These are people like us. We can see the mistakes and we should learn from them. But we also see, and this one I'll close on, but there's a scripture in the New Testament that says, God works all things together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And here we see these very flawed people, and God is using them and dealing with them, and they still interact with God. They haven't left. And God uses it, and he works these things together for good. And it's clearly on display.
And I think Jacob still has a little bout with his brother.
Oh, yeah, no,
Coming
that's,
up, yeah.
we've got good stuff to come in that, sure. And so what we see in this is these lessons for us that, you know, I don't know about you, but I see myself in a whole lot of these things. So next week.
Not the
we've
four
got-
wives, but.
That you know of.
Okay, prayer.
God, what we see here that you love us, but you love us enough not to leave us the way we are. And we see those examples with these people in the scriptures, in the words you left for us, the words you inspired, that are here to help us understand that are here to help us see that there is right and wrong, that you care about right and wrong, and yet you don't abandon us. You love us enough not to leave us the way we are, and we're grateful for that. And what I would ask this week is the strength and the understanding for us to look at these things and recognize ourselves and make the effort to look for your will and your way. Be with us as always. We go out this week, the opportunities you give us to carry your word and to carry your love to people who need it. Amen.
Man.
He does have a thing or two to say to his brothers still. But
Hi, Naya, how are you? Good to see you. Sorry, sometimes if I don't get you right away, I see the blink up top. I know you're coming in from your church, so.
Oh, no, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry to disturb you.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
You guys, again, you guys have a good week.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.